Welcome to the Beau Show. Could Caitlyn Jenner become the next governor of California? She sure thinks so and has tossed her hat into the ring after the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom, who continues to drive his state right down the drain. California has a gas tax of about 50 cents per gallon. That is almost unfathomable, as well as some of the highest taxes in the land, sales, income, you name it, and skyrocketing homelessness and tent cities that plague many of California's major cities. It has become the wild, wild west. Unemployment is rampant. California actually lost a congressional seat this year because of the mass exodus of its citizens. That has never happened before. And we are all too aware of Cali's crazy lockdown measures. And more than half of its students are not in school classrooms, thanks to teachers' unions. Gavin Newsom has adopted policies that have one set of rules for him and another set for the rest of Californians. You could not see a starker contrast between the leadership and prognosis of California and Florida. They are night and day. And they're different in just about every way. In an exclusive interview with Sean Hannity, Jenner provided a background to why she's running for governor. Here are some highlights.
I want to take that same fight, that same spirit, go to Sacramento, surround myself with some of the smartest people out there. I am an outsider. I understand that. Smartest people out there, because now I'm in a race for solutions. I need to find solutions to be able to turn this state around. I absolutely love this state. I'm a fighter, always have been. I come from a long line of fighters. I love this country. I'm a patriot. I love this state. The state's done so much for me over the years, but I've watched it crumble right in front of my eyes. And you got to stand up.
She talked about how her grandfather fought in World War I, left for dead, but fought and survived. Jenner's father fought in World War II on Omaha Beach and survived. Jenner mentioned many times how much she loved America and loved California in spite of its problems, but has watched it crumble before her very eyes. She thinks California is worth fighting for. I think that spirit is a great one because Gavin Newsom seems more interested in fighting for himself and his political aspirations than fighting for California. In describing current Governor Gavin Newsom, she sees him as a politician and a hypocrite. He dines at French Laundry, but Caitlyn describes how her employees at her restaurant aren't even working. The same is true for Nancy Pelosi, who went to her hair salon while all salons were shut down in California. That hypocrisy is so telling and so accurate. The recall required 1.5 million signatures and it got 2.1 million, which Democrats wanted to verify. How ironic is that? 18,000 companies have left California. Jenner says she doesn't want to leave, so she's choosing to stay and fight. She calls herself a compassionate disruptor or a thoughtful disruptor, using common sense. She's always been a Republican due to her ideals of lower taxes and less regulations, but socially, she has been progressive, arguing that we can promote social programs, but you have to have a good economy to do so. Jenner says we can't have a country or a state without a wall or border security. She describes the U.S. as being compassionate towards immigrants, but also responsible. She is pro-ICE and pro-law enforcement because she says we need these people, and I think she's right. From a sheer policy and personality standpoint, Jenner seems like the ideal candidate. Her ideas are common sense, and even though she's never held public office, that outsider trait is likely a good one, the way Trump came in to disrupt D.C., using a negotiator's mentality, or even like Arnold. Let's face it, Joe Biden has never been in the private sector, so it's no wonder that his policies don't help the private sector. This notion of decades of public service that makes you a better leader is simply untrue. So Jenner wants to take the same fight she has had as an Olympic athlete to Sacramento and turn California around. I think that's a noble reason to run. When you think about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his ability to beat Gray Davis, he certainly had the star power and the spirit of a warrior, which made people believe in him. But California was less liberal then than it is today. The hyper-liberalization of California will make Jenner's or any other Republican candidate's road that much steeper to climb. But maybe there's hope. With over 2 million signatures on the recall, it does show that there is some sanity out there. But 39 million people live there. 2 million isn't going to unseat Gavin Newsom. And I think this presents a very unique conundrum for Californians. Are they transphobic if they don't want Caitlyn Jenner to be their governor? There has never, ever been even a female governor there. So all the liberals who were so excited to say, finally, we have a female vice president. And isn't it so great that Pete Buttigieg is our first gay Secretary of Transportation? Are you going to vote for Caitlyn Jenner with that same logic and enthusiasm? Or will you vote for Gavin Newsom again because your progressivism is more important than your hypocrisy? This really does put liberals in a pickle. Now, on the Republican side of this, there's also a conundrum. Caitlyn Jenner is certainly a family-oriented person and someone who is unashamed of her religious beliefs. These are indeed conservative values. So will Republicans unite behind someone who is transgender that many Republicans don't understand? I would be willing to wager that more Republicans will be less hesitant to vote for her than Democrats. Possibly. Jenner represents that forced form of identity politics that liberals love. But she presents a problem because she has Republican policies. It's the notion that all blacks should vote Democrat. Why? Just because. Now, I will admit that the GOP messaging on this area has not been great. It has taken people like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rick Grenell, Ben Carson, Tim Scott, and Byron Donalds to show that the GOP can be principled and diverse. Jenner is a very interesting candidate because this is a former gold medal Olympian who had a reality show with the most well-known family in America, who has transitioned to being a woman, but who identifies as a Republican. That has to make Democrats' heads explode. But in a sheer logic or common sense perspective, she is promoting ideas that would improve California's dire straits. And from the identity politics side, she represents everything they celebrate: diversity. This should be a slam dunk for Jenner. But I have this feeling that Newsom, as terrible as he is, can survive this recall. In a recent poll, 52% of Californians approve of Newsom. Do you see what I mean? Over half of Californians think his incompetence is perfectly acceptable. Housing is only affordable for the rich in California. Yet now the rich don't even want to be there. That's just insane policy. 45% of Californians think Newsom did a great or excellent job on the pandemic. How could 45% of Californians be that incredibly blind? Newsom may be giving 76,000 inmates, some of whom are violent offenders, early release. A UC Berkeley LA Times poll shows that Caitlyn Jenner polls only at about 6% and only 13% of Republicans. In fact, Jenner had the lowest support among Republicans, with 22% going to former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer. The poll shows that enthusiasm is definitely on the Republican side, and they may be more inclined to vote, but Jenner would have to get a lot more Republican support before she could go head-to-head with Newsom. 15% of voters are undecided, and that's where it can be very problematic for Newsom. He doesn't have those in the bag. But as I said, Jenner has a tough road ahead, even to win Republican support. This could be a unique time for the GOP to modernize some of its positions, at least in the California GOP sense, because we all know a California Republican is not the same as an Alabama Republican. They're different. The same holds true for openly gay former ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, a Trump appointee who would certainly mount very interesting opposition to Newsom, and he's been encouraged to run. Both Jenner and Grenell represent the rare combination of conservative policies with non-traditional personas. But that also represents an opportunity to take a win away from the Democrats, who have had certain groups cornered for so many years. But the problem still remains that half of Californians don't want Newsom to be recalled. They seem to love the high taxes, open borders, tent cities, high unemployment, lack of affordable housing, and draconian lockdown measures. Yes, half of California thinks that. This is why I think that Newsom's chances are oddly high of surviving. Californians would rather be called transphobic than Democrat-phobic. Isn't that peculiar? You would almost think that any Republican could beat Newsom, but I think this may speak to the hyper-liberalization of California, where no Republican stands a chance. I just don't understand how Californians can believe that their governance has benefited them. You're getting taxed at 50 cents per gallon, but what are you getting out of it? Your income is getting taxed to hell and back, and your goods are costlier due to inflation. How do liberal policies like this benefit your lives as Californians? I want to know. It's a situation, honestly, like Minneapolis, where decades of bad government led to some of the worst crime in the United States. You'd almost think you should maybe give something else a try. Californians did this when they elected Ronald Reagan. But ever since then, with the minor exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger, it has been all one-party rule. And California has been the microcosm of liberal government, whereas Florida has been the microcosm of conservative leadership. And the results speak for themselves. You don't lose a congressional seat, bleed citizens and jobs, and call yourself a success story. So while Caitlyn Jenner may not be the most ideal candidate to replace Gavin Newsom, who is? The Democrats are more concerned with ensuring another Democrat is in the wings and on the ballot than they are considering a possible Republican alternative, as if somehow lowering taxes and getting people back to work and kids in class is a bad thing. For every candidate, I think you have to look at the policies in addition to the person. We've gotten to a point where the candidate's identity somehow supersedes his or her positions. I wouldn't vote for Caitlyn Jenner because she is transgender or because she is a woman or a man. I would vote for her if I thought she had the best chance to turn California around. Gavin Newsom has had his chance, and bad times expose bad policies. But the same voters who jump up and down about the first whatever, first VP, first this, first that, first transgender, first gay, first black, first Asian, it's like some victory. Have you examined the record and policies of this person? I feel like we need to know a lot more about Caitlyn Jenner's aims and positions, and I imagine we will in the coming weeks and months. But Republicans need to square with this just as much as Democrats do. It's fine to vote for someone that doesn't look like you, but you should share some core values. And based on immigration and taxes and regulations and jobs, Jenner seems to be pretty sound. If you can't vote for her because she's transgender, that's on you. If you don't vote for her just because she's a Republican, that's also on you. The hypocrisy is the same. She may or may not be the best Republican in the race. I don't know. But she does present a conundrum that needs to be reckoned with. And if she were to win the Republican nomination and go head-to-head with Newsom and lose, it will say a lot about Californians and their virtue signaling over identity politics. Equal rights or even sexual liberty and privacy are not cornered positions by liberals. Biological men competing with women is a legitimate issue, and Jenner couldn't be better positioned to explain and litigate that issue. She knows competition like none of us do, and should be respected as such. Her love for her country and her state should also be revered. I have not heard Gavin Newsom sing the praises of his country, or his state, his law enforcement, or his border patrol. He does, however, value a good meal at French Laundry, though, while no one else can even go get their favorite hamburger in town. So I'm willing to give Jenner a fair chance. And if she ever wanted to come on this show, I'd be delighted to give her an interview. A much more in-depth one than Sean Hannity gave, and more fair than Dana Bash, who would softball Hunter Biden faster than you can say crack cocaine. I'd like to see Jimmy Kimmel have an audience of all homeless people if he's serious about homelessness. But he's not serious. He's a charlatan. He's more interested in making fun of Caitlyn Jenner. So let's be open-minded. I'm willing to be, because we need to know more. I'm Beau, and that's the show.